On New Year's Eve in New York City, while the world was counting down with champagne and fireworks, a man sat alone on a bench in Central Park. His face looked tired, his eyes empty like someone who had lost something he could never get back. Then suddenly, a little girl in worn-out socks, no shoes, rosy cheeks from the freezing wind walked up to him and asked, "You look sad, mister. Want to meet my mommy?" That simple question, innocent and unexpected, would become the key to unlocking a heartwarming journey. A journey of three broken souls who each believed they were invisible, unlovable, or beyond hope, until they found each other in the most unexpected way. If you've ever felt lost in this world, if you've ever thought miracles weren't meant for people like you, then stay with us till the very end of this story. Because maybe, just maybe, the thing you've been waiting for is a question from a warm little heart. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more real moving stories that will help you see life more gently, one moment at a time. New York, New Year's Eve, December 31st, 2006. Central Park shimmered under the festive lights. From the bare treetops to the snow-dusted wooden fences, everything sparkled as if dusted with strands of magic. The air carried the warm scent of roasted chestnuts, hot cocoa, and the sound of laughter from families gathered to welcome the new year. Near the frozen lake where people usually skated, a few kids were throwing snowballs at one another. The fireworks hadn't started, but hearts were already pulsing to the countdown. In the middle of this joyful scene, Ethan Cole, 38, sat quietly on a wooden bench. His expensive cashmere coat couldn't hide his slouched posture and drooping shoulders. Beside him lay a knitted scarf Rachel had made the only thing he brought from his empty apartment. The lights in the distance reflected in his eyes, but his gaze was hollow. Ethan had the chiseled features of a successful man, square jaw, straight nose, deep-set eyes. But tonight, all of it was veiled in darkness. No one in the lively crowd recognized the man as the CEO of Cole Systems, the leading software giant in the edtech world. No one knew that for the past 364 days, Ethan hadn't once counted down to the new year. He hadn't planned on going out tonight, but his high-rise apartment on the Upper West Side felt suffocatingly silent. The glass walls, imported kitchen island, and Italian leather chairs, all remnants of the life he once lived with Rachel. But Rachel was gone. She had left on a winter night 2 years ago, silently, bravely, just like the way she lived. Don't close your heart just because I'm no longer here. Keep living, Ethan. Don't let me be the reason the sun sets in your life. That was the last thing she said before she slipped away, soft as breath fading into the cold air. Ethan had promised, but like all promises made to the departed, it was easier to forget than he expected. He bowed his head, rubbing his hands together, his breath turning into a faint mist in the frigid air. In the distance, church bells chimed gently, mixing with the sound of kids practicing a countdown. A young couple passed by holding hands, cheeks flushed red from the cold, their eyes sparkling with joy. Ethan turned his face away. The world kept turning, and it didn't wait for those stuck in memories. "You look sad, mister." A small, high-pitched voice came from beside him. Startled, Ethan turned. A little girl no older than 3 stood just a few steps away. Her messy blonde hair framed rosy cheeks, and she wore a frayed gray knit hat. Her oversized coat swallowed her tiny frame, and most notably, her small feet were only covered in wool socks, no shoes. "Do you want to meet my mommy?" she asked, as if inviting him to a strange birthday party with only 2 guests. Ethan didn't reply right away. His heart caught in his chest at the sight of those innocent eyes, eyes unafraid, filled with light, as if the world were still a magical place worth believing in. "And you are?" "I'm Ellie," she beamed. A piece of bread loosely held in her hand dropped a few crumbs onto the snow. "Are you out here alone?" Ethan asked, glancing around in concern. "Nope. My mommy's over there." She pointed to the edge of the park where the lights were dimmer. Ethan squinted in that direction. Under an old street lamp, a woman crouched beside a public trash can, carefully sorting through cardboard boxes and tin cans as if searching for a gem among the world's discarded things. Even from afar, Ethan noticed the way she moved, not frantic, not clumsy, but quiet and deliberate. Her long chestnut hair was tied back with a few strands falling loose under the streetlight. There was something different about her. Not someone who had given up, but someone who was surviving. Ethan looked back at the little girl. "Aren't you cold?" Ellie shook her head. "I'm used to it. But you look cold. You've been sitting here all alone." That sentence stopped him in his tracks. No one had ever said that to him, not in his 60-floor office, not at billionaire galas. Yet this child, with a single glance, had seen through his designer coat and hollow eyes. "So, your mom won't be mad that you're talking to a stranger. Mommy says not to talk to people, but if someone looks sad, I'm allowed to try and make them smile." Ethan slowly stood. He looked at the girl, then at the woman across the park. Maybe, just maybe, a simple conversation wouldn't hurt anyone. "Would you take me to meet your mom?" Ellie reached out and took his hand. Her tiny fingers were icy but full of life. "Let's go. My mommy's really pretty, but she gets tired a lot. We're looking for something to eat tonight." On the snowy ground, glimmering with light, the small wool-covered feet led Ethan through the crowd. And for the first time in 2 years, the heart of a man who had turned to stone stirred. Ethan walked beside Ellie along a snow-dusted path, the twinkling lights reflecting off the cobblestones beneath their feet. A strange calm settled over him, as if with each tiny step, the little girl took something inside him was slowly being cleansed. His breath curled into soft clouds in the freezing air. Yet the small hand holding his, though cold, radiated a warmth he couldn't quite name. "What's your name?" Ellie asked, her eyes lighting up as she looked at him. "Ethan," he replied with a soft smile. "Ethan Cole." She repeated slowly, as if sounding out a new word. "Sounds like a good person's name." The words made Ethan pause. No one had ever called him a good person before. He was used to labels like strategic genius, unicorn, CEO, edtech tycoon. But good person, from a child he'd met less than 5 minutes ago, before he could respond. Ellie let go of his hand and ran toward the woman by the trash bin. "Mommy, I'm here," she called out. The woman looked up immediately, the instinctive reaction of a mother. When she saw her child wasn't alone, but with a strange man, she stood up fast, body tense like a shield. "Ellie, where did you go? I told you." Her voice was firm, not loud but laced with tension. "I met Mr. Ethan. He looked sad, so I thought he needed a friend." Ellie explained innocently, unaware that her mother looked nearly frozen with worry. Ethan raised both hands, instinctively trying to reassure her. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean any harm. She came to me first. I thought it was best to bring her back to you." The woman stood still. Her eyes shifted from alarmed to analytical as she looked him over the tailored coat, the Italian leather shoes, a glimpse of a Patek Philippe watch on his wrist, neatly combed hair, and the subtle scent of expensive cologne. A man like that didn't usually wander Central Park on New Year's Eve, let alone talk to a barefoot child in wool socks. "Thank you for bringing her back," she said, pulling Ellie close her eyes, never leaving Ethan. "She talks to everyone. I've told her not to, but she still does." "It's all right," Ethan said gently. She has a different kind of gaze." The woman frowned. "What do you want?" Ethan shook his head. "Nothing, I was just sitting there. She came over and said I looked sad. And honestly, she wasn't wrong." That answer softened something in the woman's eyes. She let out a slow breath, then bent down to brush the snow off Ellie's coat hem. "I'm Claire," she said, after a beat of silence. "Claire Bennett." Ethan nodded. "Nice to meet you, Claire." She didn't return the greeting, just kept studying him silently for a moment longer. Then, with a wearier tone, she said, "You're the first person she's ever brought over. I don't know why. But if you have any bad intentions, just know I'm not as weak as I look." Ethan gave a slight smile and tilted his head. "I believe that." Claire looked at him longer than necessary. Her eyes, though rimmed with the shadows of sleepless nights, held a sharpness that was unmistakable. There was no fear in them, only resilience, the kind forged through hardship. She had a beauty that didn't ask for attention. It just existed, quiet and undeniable, and Ethan couldn't look away. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I'm not trying to intrude, but if you'd like something warm, there's a decent hot cocoa cart just down the corner." Claire immediately shook her head. "We don't beg." "It's not charity," Ethan replied quickly. "Just sharing. Maybe I need it too." Claire was silent. That wasn't what she expected from someone like him. Her instincts told her Ethan wasn't homeless, nor was he some lonely wanderer looking for company in the park. "Just one cup." "For the kid," she said. "I don't like owing anyone. Then let's say you're doing me a favor giving me a new friend on New Year's Eve." Ethan smiled softly. "Not such a bad trade, right?" Claire studied him clearly, searching for a reason to say no again. But before she could, Ellie squealed, "I want cocoa and soft bread." Ethan knelt down and smiled at her. "All right, princess, let's go." Claire froze. She didn't usually let strangers call her daughter princess. But the way Ethan said it, not with pity, not with condescension, but with respect, with warmth, made her pause. And on a night this cold, with her fingers already numb, maybe? Just maybe a cup of cocoa wasn't the worst thing for them both, just this once. The little street cart sat quietly at the park's edge under a leafless tree strung with warm yellow lights. Steam rose from the boiling kettle, fogging up the glass panels of the wooden cart. The sweet scent of cocoa and waffle cones lingered in the biting air. Claire's hands were numb from the cold, but she held tightly to Ellie's small fingers. That little hand was the one thing anchoring her to existence, a reminder she had to stay strong, minute by minute. Ethan slowly approached the cart, nodding to the elderly vendor, an Italian man with bright eyes and a red knit scarf. 3 hot cocos and 1 croissant. "No, make that 2. Claire hesitated behind him. "We just need 1. For the child." Without turning, Ethan replied evenly, "Then the others are mine." The vendor smiled and handed over 3 paper cups. Ethan carefully handed one to Ellie, who was bouncing on her toes with excitement. "Careful. It's hot," he reminded her gently. Ellie beamed. "Thank you, Mr. Ethan. I've never had hot cocoa outside before." Claire took the cup from her daughter's hands, watching as Ellie blew on it carefully, as if she'd known how to do it forever. Her eyes sparkled under the streetlight, her thin cheeks glowing against the winter's chill. Claire let out a soft sigh, one no one heard, then looked toward Ethan, who had taken a seat on a plastic chair nearby. "You're a businessman?" Claire asked, her voice uncertain. Ethan raised an eyebrow, smiling. "Because of the coat? Because you ordered cocoa like you were at a 5-star restaurant?" Claire replied, sipping cautiously. Ethan chuckled. "I work in tech. Educational software, actually. CEO, technically, though. That sounds a lot grander than it feels. Most days I just wonder what I'm missing while chasing all the things I thought I wanted." Claire didn't respond, but her eyes said she understood more than he said aloud. "What about you?" Ethan asked. Claire looked over the rim of her cup. "I studied education. I was going to be a high school literature teacher." "Literature?" Ethan looked surprised. Shakespeare and fountain pens on blank pages, and students sneaking snacks in the back row. Claire smiled faintly, a short-lived smile full of old dreams. "I used to think I'd start a book club for the kids no one cared about. Teach them that words could save lives. And now you don't believe that anymore." Claire was quiet for a long moment. Then she whispered, "I still believe. But books don't pay rent. And no one lets you teach when you drop out halfway." Ethan nodded slightly. He didn't press. Not because he was afraid of her story, but because he didn't want to bruise the dignity of someone who was clearly holding everything together with sheer willpower. "So, what do you do now?" Claire gently stroked Ellie's hand. "Find food. Dodge police. Count the freezing hours each night. Read stories to my daughter, whether we're sleeping on a bench or a train station floor." Her voice held no self-pity, just facts worn smooth by repetition. Ellie piped up, "Mom reads so well. One time she read The Little Match Girl, and I thought I was the girl." Ethan looked down at Ellie and smiled. "Did you have the same ending?" "Nope. Mommy changed it. She said the little girl got invited into a warm house, got purple wool shoes and soup. Mommy says sad stories should be rewritten if someone's brave enough to do it." Ethan looked at Claire. She didn't meet his gaze, but he knew she heard. Her thin shoulders trembled slightly, whether from the cold or from being seen, he couldn't tell. "Have you ever told anyone about dropping out? About wanting to teach?" Claire shook her head. "Who would I tell? People with warm homes don't listen, and other homeless people, they're too busy surviving." A gust of wind swept through. Ethan raised his collar, then reached for his scarf and extended it toward her. "You don't have to," she started immediately. "It's just a scarf." "No. I don't want pity." Ethan paused. "It's not pity. It's admiration." Claire froze. She looked at him, really looked for the first time. "You don't know me. You don't know the things I've been through. You don't know there were nights I thought, if I just never woke up, maybe she'd be better off." Ethan didn't flinch. "What stopped you?" Claire looked down at Ellie, who was happily sipping her cocoa, licking the rim. "She needs me. Even if it's just me left, I'm still her whole world." Those words pierced straight into Ethan's core. For the past year and a half, he had lived as if Rachel was the only person worth loving. And once she was gone, the doors all slammed shut. But in front of him was a woman with nothing, no home, no safety net, who still held one door open every day for her little girl with every ounce of love and grit she had left. "Have you ever thought about going back to teaching?" Ethan asked quietly. Claire gripped her cup tighter. Every day. But dreams need tuition too. Ethan straightened, his voice calm. Maybe there's a way to rewrite your story, like you did with the little match girl. But this time, not just for your daughter. Claire turned to him, suspicion flickering, but also something else, hope. You gonna give a scholarship to a homeless dropout, Mom? Ethan smiled. Maybe, but only if she's willing to take it. Not as someone who needs help, but as someone capable of changing lives. Starting with her own. Claire didn't respond, but she didn't say no. And Ethan knew somewhere between a hot cup of cocoa, the sting of winter wind, and a pair of sock-covered feet with no shoes, something had quietly begun. They sat on 2 plastic chairs at the edge of the sidewalk, backs resting against a bare oak tree. In front of them, the cocoa cart steamed steadily, and just beyond the laughter and glow, the world had no idea that only a few steps away, 2 strangers were quietly piecing themselves back together. Ellie curled up in her mother's lap. Her tiny hands still clutched the half-empty paper cup. Her lips moved softly, humming a New Year's song she'd heard earlier from a loudspeaker, though her eyelids were growing heavy. Cold wind brushed her rosy cheeks, making her hair fly wild, and Claire gently reached down to adjust the old knit hat slipping off her head. Ethan watched them, a tightness forming in his chest that he couldn't explain. Would you tell me about when everything changed? He asked quietly. I'll understand if you don't want to. It's just... Claire looked up. Her eyes weren't cold, just tired. You really want to hear a sad story on New Year's Eve? Ethan exhaled slowly. I've lived long enough in my own silence to know that sometimes telling it is how we begin to move forward. Claire said nothing at first. Then she turned her gaze toward the frozen lake where the streetlights shimmered against the ice. I found out I was pregnant with Ellie in my 3rd year of college. I was majoring in literature education. Top 5 in my class. I tutored a professor's son, was even offered a teaching assistant position after graduation. Her voice didn't waver, but there was a folded-up grief in it, the kind that once opened could blanket everything. Ellie's father, Ethan, asked gently. Disappeared. The moment he found out. Said I was ruining both our futures. Claire didn't cry, didn't accuse. She spoke as if recounting a character in someone else's book. My family disowned me. My mother said, if you want to be a single mom, then raise it yourself. So I did. Ethan didn't interrupt. He let her words flow the way you let a river find its path through stone. At first I rented a tiny room, took a job at the campus library. But by the 2nd semester, I couldn't afford tuition. I lost my scholarship for missing too many classes. Ellie kept getting sick that first month. No one wanted to hire a pregnant cashier. I got evicted for late rent, and one night, Ellie was 3 weeks old when we spent our first night sleeping in a train station. Claire glanced down at her daughter, now fast asleep, lips parted slightly. She doesn't know any of that. I never told her. In her mind, that night was an adventure. Mommy and I went exploring like a princess and her stepmom from a fairy tale. Ethan tightened his grip around his coffee cup. You never blamed yourself? Claire shook her head slowly. I did. But if it weren't for Ellie, I probably would have ended my life on one of those cold nights. She's the only reason I didn't give up. Silence stretched out between them. Wind stirred the empty branches overhead, carrying with it the scent of cocoa and faint music from the plaza. Soft, piercing, deeply human. Then Claire looked at him. What about you? Why would someone like you sit here alone on New Year's Eve? like the world has nothing left worth holding on to. Ethan smiled faintly, not avoiding the question. For the first time in months, he didn't feel suffocated answering it. Rachel, my wife, and I had a tradition. Every December 31st, we came to this very park bench. No parties, no fireworks, just the two of us, a wool scarf and a thermos of mulled cider. Claire tilted her head slightly. She passed away 2 years ago. Ovarian cancer. Stage 3 by the time we found out. I threw everything at it, money connections, the best doctors. But cancer doesn't listen to money. And Rachel, she just got tired. Claire didn't speak, but her hand, the one holding Ellie, tightened as if breathing a little life into her daughter through sheer will. She said, "I'm not afraid of dying, Ethan. I'm afraid of you forgetting how to live. I promised I'd keep going. But I didn't. I kept breathing, kept attending meetings, running the company. But live number, Ethan's voice lowered. I've been like a ship without a compass, moving, but going nowhere." Claire bowed her head. Another pause, but this time it wasn't hesitation. It was recognition. Then she said, "You had a love so deep, nothing after it felt like enough. That's not something everyone gets." Ethan looked at her. Her eyes didn't pity him. They held the quiet understanding of someone who'd known loss and still chose to get up every morning. "Claire," he said slowly, "if you had the chance to go back to school to teach again, would you take it?" Claire raised an eyebrow. "Are you thinking of helping me?" "Not helping," Ethan said, shaking his head. "Investing. I've invested in lifeless software before. But you have the power to change people, especially kids like Ellie. I want to invest in that." Claire studied him longer than any glance before. Then she said softly, "And if I say no, then I'll still sit here, drink cocoa with you a little longer, and wish for you to find your own miracle." Claire didn't respond. But she reached over and pulled Ellie's scarf up tighter around her neck, then looked up at the sky. A single firework burst over Times Square, red and gold, tearing through the night. She whispered more to herself than to him. Maybe miracles don't begin with sparkling lights. Maybe they start with a cup of cocoa, a genuine question, and someone willing to believe in what no one else sees. After the first firework lit up the New Year's Eve sky, the atmosphere became dazzling in a surreal way. People clapped, cheered, counted down as bursts of light exploded across the dark canvas, like wishes ignited for a better year ahead. But in a quiet corner of the park, under the dim yellow glow of the cocoa cart, something else was unfolding, silent, gentle, yet no less profound. An offer. A flicker of light in eyes long accustomed to the dark. Claire sat still, gently patting Ellie's back as the child slept curled in her arms. Her cheek rested on her mother's chest, breathing softly, unbothered by the months spent sleeping on park benches with cardboard boxes for pillows. She looked at Ethan, her gaze not as guarded as before, but not fully open either. Something within her was tugging in two directions. Survival instinct versus a fragile seed of trust just beginning to sprout. "You want to invest in me?" Claire asked flatly. "You know you sound like a PR campaign, right?" Ethan smiled. "I'm not filming this for Instagram, if that's what you're worried about." Claire lowered her head slightly and let out a quiet laugh. The first one that didn't carry her usual defense. "And what if I fail? What if I accept your help and fall flat on my face?" "Then you'd fail like every brave person who's ever tried." Ethan answered without hesitation. "But I don't think you will." You've already come farther than most with just a pair of socks and a heart that refuses to quit. Claire held his gaze longer this time. She didn't speak, but her eyes asked, "Why do you believe in me?" Ethan seemed to understand. He sat up straight, pulled a small card and pen from his coat pocket. "This is the address of a small hotel on the west side, not far from here. I booked a room. Just a modest space with a bed and a kitchen, already paid for a month." Claire instinctively clutched Ellie tighter. "I don't take money from strangers." "It's not money," Ethan said softly. "It's a place to sleep. One normal night without the police asking you to move. One night where Ellie gets a real bed and an actual pillow." Claire froze. He didn't say, "Because I pity you," or "I want to save you." He simply made an offer the way one might offer tea after a deep conversation. "I'll pay you back," she murmured. "You don't need to," Ethan replied immediately. "But if you want to, then repay it by giving yourself and Ellie a real chance." Still, Claire didn't reach for the card. She ran her fingers through Ellie's hair, her hand trembling slightly. Not from the cold, but perhaps from standing at the threshold of something new for the first time in a long while. "What happens after that? You give me a check and disappear?" Ethan gave a small laugh. "I'm a CEO, not a savior. I'm not promising anything extraordinary. But if you choose to move forward, I'll walk beside you. I can support you if needed, keep my distance if you prefer, and I'll never intrude if what you need is the space to stand on your own." Claire stayed quiet. Not from doubt, but from emotion. Each of Ethan's words landed exactly where she was most vulnerable, a part of her that had held itself together far too long in a world that only knew how to say no. Finally, she nodded. A small, firm nod. "Just 1 month," she said. "After that, I'll figure it out myself." "Deal," Ethan replied. "Just 1 month. No strings attached." "And Ellie," Claire glanced at her daughter, then back at him. "I don't want her thinking this is charity. She's already strong enough not to need pity. Then let her see her mom take a brave step forward and believe that kindness still exists." Claire exhaled. This time it was a sigh of relief. Ethan stood and flagged down a passing taxi. He opened the door, then turned to help Claire up. She cradled Ellie in her arms, stepped into the car with a look that still studied him. But it wasn't a wall anymore. It was a window, letting in a sliver of light after a long winter. "Would you like me to take you there?" Ethan asked, taking a respectful step back. Claire shook her head. "I can do it. Ellie will wake up if there's someone unfamiliar nearby." He nodded. "The address is on the card. The front desk already has your name. The key will be waiting." She took the card, holding it like it was a fragile ticket to a world she wasn't sure she was allowed to believe in. "Thank you," she said softly. "I don't know if I trust you yet, but thank you for not making me." Ethan smiled. "Thank you for not saying no." The taxi pulled away. Ethan stood there, hands in his coat pockets, the wind brushing through his hair. He didn't know what would come next. But he knew one thing: on a night when no one was waiting for miracles, he had just touched one. And sometimes miracles aren't things that happen. They're what we allow the beginning of something new. January 1st, 2007. New York woke slowly from the days of New Year's Eve. Snow still blanketed the iron steps of old apartment buildings, half-buried cars lined the streets, and champagne bottles lay tipped over in alleyways beneath the pale, reluctant sun of the new year. Inside a modest hotel tucked between the aging red brick buildings of Hell's Kitchen Room 204 was bathed in soft morning light. It wasn't large, but it had what mattered: a double bed, a small kitchenette, a shiny sink, and most importantly, a small bed just for Ellie. A real bed. My real bed, Ellie shouted, leaping onto the mattress like she'd just discovered Heaven's Gate. Claire stood by the window, light casting across her cheek, making her squint slightly. Her arm still clutched the fabric bag, holding everything they owned, a few clothes, old books, and a notebook she always carried filled with poems, fragments of thoughts, and scribbled lines of self-healing. The envelope Ethan left at the front desk contained the room key, a Wi-Fi guide, and a short handwritten note. "Good morning, first day of a new year. I hope it was quiet enough for you to sleep all the way through. E. Cole." Claire folded the note. She wasn't sure she trusted the man completely. But a man who'd met thousands and was chosen by her daughter to come home with them, maybe that wasn't just coincidence. Day 3. Ethan returned holding a bag of bagels and 2 coffees. Claire opened the door with caution, but her eyes were lighter than the last time. "You're still here," he teased. "Because Ellie refuses to leave that heavenly bed," Claire replied. They sat at the small table by the window where Claire had neatly arranged GED prep notes, printed worksheets, and reference books. "I found an adult learning center on 42nd," Claire said before he could ask. "They have night classes 3 times a week. If I stay on track, I could finish high school in 6 months." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "I never doubted you'd take it seriously." Claire sipped her coffee. "They said I need to pay a registration fee." "I'll cover it," Ethan said without hesitation. "No." Claire shook her head. "I can work part-time. Office cleaning, cafe work, anything legal," Ethan nodded. "I have a small branch office in Chelsea, part of my company. Good staff, calm environment. You could help a few evenings organize files or tidy up. I'll make the intro if you want." Claire was quiet for a moment. "If I show up, I don't want anyone thinking I'm someone you're pitying. Then I'll say, you're someone I trust." Claire looked at him. Something shifted in her eyes, lighter, softer. Closer, 1 week later. Claire officially enrolled in the night class. During the day, she and Ellie read books at the local library. In the evenings, Claire worked at the Cole Systems branch office, mostly cleaning at first, but gradually helping with filing, scheduling, and small bookkeeping tasks. Ellie would draw. The office had a small corner just for her. A box of colored pencils, a few books, and an old iPod Ethan had left behind. Ethan didn't visit often. He kept his promise, never intruding, never steering. But every weekend, he'd invite Claire and Ellie to the park or a small museum. Claire never declined, not because she needed help, but because for the first time, Ellie was getting to live like a child should. One day after class, Claire walked into the office and saw Ellie coloring a castle. Ethan sat beside her, helping her place stickers on the towers. Claire stopped at the door, silently watching. She had never seen her daughter smile like that. Not the smile meant to reassure a worried mother, but joy. Real joy. And in the colorful world Ellie was creating, Claire noticed something: a man in a long coat standing beside the mother and child. Night 20. Claire studied at the kitchen table. Ellie had already fallen asleep. Ethan arrived late carrying toasted bread and a container of lentil soup. "You're becoming a chef," Claire joked. "Because I discovered I have 2 loyal customers who can't cook," Ethan replied. He pulled out a stack of flashcards. "Want help reviewing vocabulary?" Claire blinked. "You know how to teach?" "No." Ethan smiled. "But I know how to listen, and I want to hear you talk about something that makes you feel alive again." They studied for 2 hours. When Claire mispronounced a word, Ethan didn't laugh. He simply repeated it correctly and waited for her to try again. When she yawned, he brewed tea. When she paused in silence, he stayed waiting patiently. That night after he left, Claire stood before the mirror. She no longer saw a failed mother. She saw someone returning not because she was rescued, but because someone had finally seen her. Day 28. Ethan received a short message from Claire. I applied for the language teaching methods course. Got accepted. Starting dual track next week. And thank you for believing. Ethan stared at the screen, his hand trembling slightly. Not from surprise, but from emotion. Claire had once fallen. But now, step by step, she was rising, walking toward herself. Day 30. For the first time, Claire invited Ethan over for dinner. The small hotel kitchen smelled of tomato-simmered pasta. Ellie wore a paper apron and helped sprinkle cheese onto the plates. Ethan arrived with garlic bread and 3 cans of soda. They sat under the soft yellow glow of the kitchen light, laughing as Ellie told a story about how one of the kids at the library had drawn a purple sun. And in that moment, though no one said it out loud, all 3 of them understood they had entered a new chapter of life. A chapter without pity, without saving, only presence, trust, and the small, steady steps of hope. It was Saturday night, and snow had begun to fall again. The flakes drifted quietly, laying a soft white coat over windowsills, car rooftops, and the wooden steps in front of the Midtown West shops. Room 204 was still lit. Under the warm yellow glow, Ellie lay curled on the sofa, a blanket pulled up over her shoulders, her head resting on a pillow, a half-open children's book resting on her chest. Her breathing was steady and deep, her lashes fluttering slightly as if she were dreaming of a peaceful place. Claire sat at the desk, hair tied back, highlighter in hand, eyes fixed on a teaching manual. She didn't realize how long she'd been still. The words had stopped registering. Her mind had drifted somewhere else entirely. A soft knock broke the silence. She opened the door. Ethan stood there holding a box of warm pastries and a small bouquet of white tulips wrapped in newspaper. Simple, clean, unpretentious. "You're early," Claire said softly, a tired but familiar smile tugging at her lips. "Snow's picking up. Figured I'd deliver the pastries before they turn into bricks," he replied, offering the flowers. "These aren't romantic. Just to thank you for a pretty incredible month." Claire accepted them, eyes resting on the tulips, the first beautiful thing she'd been given since high school graduation. "Thank you," she whispered. "Not for the flowers, but for not treating me like a charity case." Ethan chuckled. "I've invested in plenty of startups, but you're the first one who's ever made me rethink what courage actually means." Dinner was simple grilled chicken pastries, olive oil salad, and mint tea. Ellie slept through it all, occasionally stirring and sighing softly. Claire draped a second blanket over her daughter, then returned to the table. "What are you studying tonight?" Ethan asked, glancing at her notes. "Classroom motivation strategies," Claire replied. "I want to be the kind of teacher students want to show up for, not just fear for grades." Ethan nodded. "I had a teacher like that. 8th grade math. She never punished us for forgetting homework, but she always asked, 'What made your heart happy today?'" Claire laughed. "I should write that one down." "I think you'll be that kind of teacher," Ethan said gently. "Every time you talk about teaching, your voice softens. It becomes clearer, brighter." Claire went quiet. Then softly, "I used to think I didn't deserve to stand in front of a classroom anymore." "Why?" "Because I've slept on benches. Because I've gone without dinner. Because I let my dream get broken halfway." Ethan paused for a few seconds. "Maybe it's because of those things, that you deserve it more than anyone." Claire looked up at him. In the lamplight and the snowy reflection in the window, their eyes met, no walls, no distance. "Ethan," she murmured. He waited, patient, as always. "Did you ever think you could feel something again after losing Rachel?" The question gave Ethan pause. He glanced at Ellie, still peacefully sleeping, then back to Claire, a woman who had once built a fortress around her heart, now cracking the smallest window open. "At first, no," he said softly. "I thought that if I let myself love again, I'd be betraying her memory." Claire swallowed. "I understand. But I realized Rachel wouldn't want me to live in grief. She once said, 'Love doesn't have a limit on how many times it can happen. It only has a limit on how much courage we have.'" Claire smiled faintly. She was wise. Ethan tilted his head slightly. "And you? Are you afraid to love?" Claire looked down at the table, her fingers tracing the rim of her teacup. "I'm not afraid of love. I'm afraid of being needed. People only needed me when they were broken. And once they healed, they left me behind." Ethan didn't respond right away. He stepped closer to the desk, and leaned just enough for their eyes to meet at close distance. "Then let me not need you," he said quietly. "Let me choose to stay, even if I don't need anything except a reason to believe that it wasn't a mistake sitting on that bench that night." Claire raised an eyebrow gently. Something in her expression softened like a sheet of ice beginning to thaw. "You don't know what you're saying?" "Don't I?" Ethan whispered. "I know I lost a wife, but I didn't lose the ability to love. And you lost every safety net, but not the right to be loved." Claire closed her eyes. A single tear slipped from the corner of her lash. Not a sob, not from pain, but the tear that comes when the weight inside finally loosens and you don't have to carry it all anymore. Ethan didn't reach for her. He didn't pull her into an embrace. He simply sat back down, a quiet presence saying, "I'll be here, whether you need me or not." And in that small room, with no music, no grand declarations, just two people quietly daring to touch something bigger than their fears, a heart began to allow again. December 31st, 2007. New York was as dazzling as ever. Windows dressed in splendor, crowds packed into Times Square, fireworks stationed on skyscraper rooftops, and lights glowing like rivers of stars pouring down Fifth Avenue. But on a quieter street in Chelsea, a softer kind of light spilled from a cozy three-story brownstone strung with delicate white lights and handmade snowflake decorations on the porch. A small wooden sign hung on the front door, "Happy New Year, Home of Hope." Ethan Cole stood by the steps, wrapped in the scarf Rachel once knitted, now mended with fresh thread and a small patch stitched with E+C+E. He looped it gently around his neck, eyes lingering on the home that not long ago he thought would remain forever cold and quiet. Claire Bennett stepped out from the kitchen, her hair tied up, wearing a volunteer teacher's uniform, a soft gray sweater, simple khaki pants, and a name tag that read, "Claire Bennett. Literacy for Change Educator." She smiled when she saw Ethan at the door. "Have you been waiting long?" "Only about a year." Ethan teased, walking in with a bag of groceries and Ellie's favorite chocolate cake. Ellie, now 4, bounded down the stairs in a soft pink party dress, glittery wool socks on her feet, waving a colorful, oversized card. "Mr. Ethan, look," she shouted, holding it up. "Our first real New Year. Mommy, me, and you." Ethan paused, throat tightening. He knelt down, took the card, and pressed it to his chest. "The most beautiful card I've ever received." Ellie threw her arms around him. "'Cause it's the first time I get to celebrate New Year in a house with a real fireplace." The little home now pulsed with life. The smell of buttered toast wafted from the kitchen. On the dining table was a modest feast, creamy mushroom pasta, fresh vegetable salad, a homemade chocolate cake baked by Claire and Ellie, and a bottle of red wine Ethan had picked up from a vintage shop in Brooklyn. They gathered at the table. Fingers brushed as they passed the salad bowl. Claire read aloud her favorite lines from Maya Angelou's Still I Rise. Her voice was steady, low, and full. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave, I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise. Ethan was quiet. Claire looked up, her eyes glistening. It's what I repeat to myself on the days I feel like I don't belong at the front of a classroom. And me, Ethan replied. Every time I think of Rachel, I hear her last words, keep living. And because of you, I've learned how to live again. After dinner, they moved to the living room. Ellie curled up in the armchair, hugging the new stuffed rabbit Ethan had given her. Claire turned on soft jazz. The lights dimmed to a warm glow. The fireplace crackled gently. Ethan stood for a moment, then walked over to Claire as she arranged the fruit tray. He touched her hand lightly, prompting her to turn, and in that moment between music firelight and the silhouette of a sleeping child, Ethan whispered, "You didn't just save Ellie. You saved me too." Claire looked at him, no longer avoiding, no longer afraid. She placed her hand over his chest, where his heart beat strong beneath the knit scarf. "No one saves anyone," she whispered. "We just find each other when we need a miracle." Ethan leaned in, brushing his lips against hers, not hurried, not dramatic. Just a quiet thank you spoken in the language of presence. From the sofa, Ellie stirred, rolled over, and mumbled, half asleep, "You kissing." They burst out laughing. The sound filled the little room, bouncing off the walls, landing in the soft folds of the blankets, dissolving into the air like the season's first snow, gentle and peaceful. Almost midnight. The TV began its countdown. 10, 9, 8. Ethan sat in the middle, one arm around Ellie, the other holding Claire's hand. The three of them, wrapped in a thick blanket, sat like a family that had always been meant to be. 3, 2, 1. "Happy New Year," Ellie shouted, tossing a handful of confetti she'd cut from old newspaper scraps. Outside the window, fireworks lit up the sky in bursts of red and gold. But Ethan didn't look out. He looked at the two small miracles beside him. One child, one woman, who had once disappeared into the cracks of the world, and he knew miracles aren't things that arrive out of nowhere. Miracles are built from patience, from belief, and from love that doesn't need a reason. 1 year ago, Ethan was a lost soul on a park bench. 1 year ago, Claire was an invisible mother between tents and cardboard boxes. 1 year ago, Ellie was a barefoot girl with a piece of bread in hand. Today they were a family, not by papers, not by blood, but by choice, made each day through small actions, a hug, and a story read before bed. The door closed behind them, but the story didn't end. Tomorrow, Claire would step into a new classroom teaching adults who once lived unseen just like her. Ethan would launch the New Roots Foundation, providing scholarships for single mothers, former homeless individuals, and those who once believed education had shut its door forever. And Ellie would continue being Ellie, drawing, asking 100 questions, and reminding the world, "If you're sad, you should meet my mommy. She's really good at making people happy." A new year began not with fireworks, but with the sound of an alarm clock and the click of heels in a quiet school hallway. Claire stepped into her first classroom of the year. The walls were decorated with student-drawn pictures, a mother holding a child, a house made from books, a snowy park bench lit by warm light. Next to one of the drawings in clumsy handwriting were the words, "Miss Claire," the first person who told me I was good enough. She paused for a moment in front of it, not out of surprise, but because her heart still wasn't used to being seen. Not as a victim, but as a source of hope. Claire once thought she had lost everything, her education, her family, her self-worth. But standing here in front of weary faces, lit by hope, she realized she hadn't lost anything. All she ever needed was a chance to be seen again. That same morning, Ethan entered his office and opened his laptop, now bearing the new logo of the foundation, New Roots Foundation, where new beginnings don't need permission. He smiled at the first email in his inbox. "Hello, Mr. Ethan. I'm a single mother who lost everything because of war. I want to return to school to become a preschool teacher. I just need a chance," he replied. "That chance is waiting as long as you still believe in it." This wasn't the job of a CEO. This was the calling of a man who had once been saved by a cup of cocoa. A silent gaze and a whisper from a 3-year-old girl. "You look sad, mister. Do you want to meet my mom?" Ellie was now a bold, bubbly, confident little girl. She still went to preschool every morning, still demanded fairy tales every night. But now, she didn't just listen. She told them. "Once upon a time," Ellie said during a class, sharing circle, "there was a man who was so sad, he forgot how to smile. But then, he met a little girl. Me and I took him to see my mommy. After that, he smiled again." Her teacher chuckled and teased. "So your mommy is a princess?" Ellie shook her head, proud and certain. "No. My mommy is a miracle. 3 people, 3 wounds, 3 hearts that once believed they were beyond repair. And yet it all began with a single question. You look sad, mister. Do you want to meet my mommy?" Not a pickup line, not a heroic rescue. Just a simple question from a barefoot child holding crumbs and hope in her hands. It wasn't pity that drove it. It was the pure instinct of kindness. That instinct we're all born with, but often forget how to use as we grow up. Ethan had sat there with a heart he thought had died. Claire had survived on instinct, too afraid to dream again. Ellie just wanted someone to see her mother the way she always did. And from 3 seemingly scattered pieces, something quietly took root. One weekend during a graduation ceremony for the Restoring Education After Crisis program, Claire took the stage. "Someone once asked me," she began, eyes scanning the room, "what did you do to turn your life around?" And I said I didn't. I just didn't close the door when opportunity knocked. She paused. It didn't come in the shape of a big scholarship or a TV camera. It came in the shape of a tiny hand, ice-cold, gripping mine on a park bench and saying, "Mommy, this man looks sad. Can you help him smile again?" Backstage, Ethan stood in silence. He wasn't crying, but his eyes shone as if Rachel was watching him from somewhere, not with jealousy, but with peace. And you, the one reading these final lines. You might be sitting in a quiet room while life rushes on outside. Maybe you feel invisible. Maybe you've lost something important. Maybe you've never thought of yourself as anyone's miracle. But remember this. You don't have to do something extraordinary. Sometimes all it takes is asking one honest question, or answering it with an open heart, and that might be enough to change a life. Maybe someone else's, or maybe your own.